Hello everyone, welcome to my other video. So today I'll be talking about higher order components in React. So let's get started. So first understand what is higher order component. Higher order components are the components which takes another component as an argument and returns a new enhanced component. So let's jump into this diagram. So here you can see three components are there. One is app component, the two is counter one and counter two component. So here the app component is nothing but the root component, and the counter 1 and counter 2 components are nothing but the child components of this app component. So here you can see that I have imported counter 1 and counter 2 component inside my app component, and inside counter 1 and counter 2 component I have used one business logic, that is increment by 1. Here what is the job of counter 1 and counter 2? So both do the same thing, that is increment by 1. The logic behind these components are the same. So while writing this code you can feel that just copying the same code twice in the different components, so it is not a good practice. So how to solve that? So here comes the concept of higher order component. So in higher order component you pass the full counter 1 and counter 2 component as an argument, and this higher order component returns you a new component with the same business logic, that is increment by 1. Now let's see how it works in real life scenario. So here you can see that I have already created one React project using create React app, and then I'm going inside this SSC directory, and inside SSC directory you will find one file app.js. So inside app.js file, first I'm deleting this whole thing which is inside this header section, and here I'm going to create two files. One is counter1.jsx, and later I will create the other file counter2.jsx, and here I'm using RC snippet to create one class full component, and here I will write one component, that is button, and it will render one text like clicked x times. And inside my app component.js file I will import that counter one component inside this. Now if I just save this code, you can see at the right side the button has been rendered. Now coming to the code again, here what I will do, I will need one state inside my counter one component. So I'm writing rconst to use the snippet for creating one constructor and the state. So I'm defining one state and starting it with 0, and on click on this button I will call one arrow function, that is increment count, and you have to define that arrow function increment count, and this arrow function will update the state of the count. So I'm writing this dot say state and increasing the current state of the count by 1. Okay, now save it, and here I have to write this dot state dot count to get the state of the count. Now if I just save it and click on this button, you can see that it is increasing by 1. So number of times I click on this button, it keeps increasing. Now coming to the code section again. So here I will need one other component that will do the same thing, that is increment one counter variable by 1. So I'm creating one a component named counter2.jsx, and again I'm using RC to create one classful component. So here I'm changing the div to button, and I'm writing the same thing like before, clicked x number of times, counter 2 clicked x number of times, and later I will just edit the previous component, that is counter 1. So inside this component again I will need the one state, and I'm just starting the state of the counter variable from 0, and on clicking on this button I will again need one method, one arrow function actually. So I'll need increment count, that will increase the state of this component by 1. So write inside this increment count arrow function these dot say state and increment the count variable by 1. So write count this dot state dot count plus 1. Now after saving it, I'm going inside app.js file, and here I will import that counter2 component inside this app.js root component. Now if I save it, you can see that two components are there. One is counter1 component and another one is counter2. Now I'm going to just edit the first component to counter1 component, clicked x number of times. Now inside the counter2 component, I have to replace the x with this dot state dot count to work like the previous component. Now the both component is working perfectly. If you click on the counter1 component, you can see it is increasing, and also if you click on the counter2 component, you can see it is also increasing. So here comes the most important part of this video. So here you can see that I have just written the same code in the two components. So exactly same business logic inside this counter 1 and counter 2 component. So I have to do something so that I can use this business logic for both of the components. So what I have to do? I have to create one higher order component. So I'm creating one higher order component, naming the file name as hoc.jsx, and I have to write const updated component equals to original component, as it will be one arrow function. And here the original component is nothing but the component that I will pass as an argument from another component. And here inside this I have to write class new component that will extend react.component, and it will render and return the original component with some props. Now return the new component, and I have to export that update component as default. Now as I have used react.component, I have to import react from react. So write import react from react. Now what I have to do, I have to go inside one of those counter component and copy this piece of code and paste it here. All right. Now as in props, what I have to do, I have to write count equals to this dot state dot count, and then I will need increment count property, and triggering on this property I will again need this arrow function. And so save it. Now go inside this counter1.jsx file and just remove this piece of code because I don't need it anymore. And now inside this render, I have to just destruct the props. So I have to write const count and increment count, and I will receive it from these dot props. Now save it. And what I have to do, I have to call the increment count, and also I have to replace it with count. Now save it, and at the right side you can see nothing is visible after counter 1 clicked because I haven't passed this component to the HOC yet. Now coming to this counter 2 component, again I have to remove this piece of code because I don't need that anymore. And again I have to just copy the same thing, just copy this line and paste it inside this counter 2 component inside render method, and also call uh, on click increment count and replace this dot state dot count to count. Now I have to just pass this counter 1 and counter 2 component as an argument to that HOC or higher order component. So for that I have to import that HOC from the same path. So write import HOC from dot slash HOC, and I have to wrap this counter 1 component within HOC. So write the way I am writing. So just write HOC and inside it pass counter 1 and do the same thing with counter 2 component. Import HOC from dot slash HOC and also wrap this counter 2 component with HOC. So you can see at the right side the both of the components working perfectly. So if you click on the counter 1 and it is increasing by 1, if you click on the counter 2 it is increasing by 1. So you can see that I am just reusing the same code of the two components in my higher order component. So in this way, you can use this higher order component to reuse your business logic inside the separate components. So that's it. I hope this video has helped you to understand what is higher order component. So thanks for watching. Please click on the subscribe and like button if you like this video.